Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. You know, ever since same-sex marriage was made legal by the Supreme Court 5 years ago, LGBTQ Americans, they were put in an odd position. They could get married one day and be fired for their sexuality the next. That is, until today. The Supreme Court out today with their biggest decision so far this term, handing the LGBTQ community their biggest legal win since the gay marriage ruling. Now, the court determining that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination based on sex, also protects gay, lesbian, and transgender workers. At the center of the case, a claim of Amy Stevens, a transgender woman who was fired from her job at a funeral parlor once she began to transition. Stevens, she died last month. Her widow posting a two-word statement after the ruling, writing simply, "We won." Also worth noting, the vote itself. 6-3, with Trump appointing Neil Gorsuch siding with the liberal justices and writing the opinion. Chief Justice John Roberts also siding with the majority. Now, the timing of the ruling leaving LGBTQ advocates with, well, near whiplash after the Trump administration took a major step against gay rights just this Friday. The administration putting forward a new rule allowing doctors and hospitals to refuse to treat this population if they think doing so would violate their personal religious beliefs. That rule announced not just during Pride Month, but on the 4-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre as well. That, plus the continued murders of black transgender women, prompting rallies in both Brooklyn as well as Los Angeles this weekend to protect black trans lives. Now, today's ruling for gay rights, one of several big developments on the High Court this Monday, the justices refusing to review the doctrine of qualified immunity for police officers. Now, qualified immunity, it creates legal wiggle room when examining if an officer used excessive force during an arrest. Unless there is a clearly established prior court ruling that bans specific conduct, police, they're given that legal room given how quickly officers must make life or death decisions. The calls to end qualified immunity, they've been only growing since the death of George Floyd. It is also a major plank of the demands among Black Lives Matter organizers as well as marchers. 4 justices they would have needed to agree to begin the review that apparently did not happen. And the court also declined to hear a group of lower-level gun cases, all of which were seeking to expand on gun rights. And while the court also declined to take on a sanctuary state case out of California, that's a win for the state and immigration advocates, it was also a setback for the Trump administration. The court has still not yet revealed its decision on DACA and the fate of about 2 million so-called dreamers. That ruling, it could come down as early as this Thursday. And for insight into all the court did and did not do today, we turn to Garrett Epps. Garrett, he's a contributor writer for The Atlantic, and he's also a constitutional law professor at the University of Baltimore. Garrett, sometimes I think landmark case gets to be a 10 overused. Not in this case. This has huge consequences, and I think it says something how we came to a 6-3 decision.
Yeah, I would say both of those things are correct. The practical consequences are quite large. The first thing I thought when I realized what had happened, and by the way, the Supreme Court's website basically crashed just as the opinion was coming down, so it took me quite a while. The first thing I thought was, what a bad week for the Trump administration, which on Friday rescinded civil rights protections for gays, lesbians, and trans people in healthcare. Really not a good, and had supported not extending Title VII to them. Not a good week for the Trump administration. But beyond that, it's striking in that the opinion is so clear-cut in that it is 6-3, and that in that 6 is not only Justice Gorsuch, who is one of the most conservative justices, but also the Chief Justice. And he had been in dissent, bitter dissent, in the Obergefell case. And so the signal is that something has changed, probably something in society, but also certainly something inside the court. And the court is really serious about this. They recognize, Justice Gorsuch, in his opinion, says this is a momentous question. They recognize that this is going to affect the lives of thousands of people and thousands of employers. And the majority really rises to try to meet that challenge.
Garrett, and try to take out the morality out of this, but both the logic and the consequences. If the administration knew the Supreme Court was going to rule as early as this week on Friday as it relates to workplace protections for the LGBTQ community, why would they come down with a governmental order as it relates to health care on Friday? And does today's Supreme Court ruling apply to that as well?
It doesn't directly apply, no, but the rationale, that will apply to other statutes that forbid discrimination because of sex. And, the statutes, medical care is a very, very tightly regulated area. And I am sure there are many statutes forbidding discrimination. And there's going to be extensive litigation about it. As for why the Trump administration did what it did or does anything the way it does, I am not sure that they would not have rushed to get the regulation out in order to please the base, right? Who are not on board with the project of gay, lesbian, and trans rights. At any rate, the administration has demonstrated, both before the court and in other areas, that it is willing to drag its feet as hard as it can against change, whether that change is preventable or inevitable. And in this case, I expect they'll keep fighting until the end of the Trump administration, wherever that may be.
Obviously, another tentpole for the administration has been on the subject of immigration. They took one on the chin today vis-a-vis sanctuary cities, the court ruling with California. We could be hearing, and do you think we will be hearing as early as Thursday about DACA and once and for all the Supreme Court will give clarity for Dreamers?
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if the DACA case came down on Thursday. On the other hand, it wouldn't shock me if it comes down on the last day. This is very contentious. I don't look for the kind of display of dignity and unanimity or unity that the court is displaying there. I think you will see a very different lineup of justices, and I'm not at all confident which way it's going to come out. But the court releases its opinions, when they're ready. And with a contentious case with multiple opinions, that can stretch on and on and on, because each justice who is writing a separate opinion has to circulate that opinion to the others and hear their comments and incorporate their comments and circulate it again. And it's not surprising that a lot of these very contentious cases go right up until the bell. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear from the DACA case for another 2 weeks.
Also, sometimes it's interesting in these windows what they choose not to hear. Qualified immunity, obviously, for law enforcement has been in the headlines for all the obvious reasons the last few weeks. The court took a pass on that, as they also did on a pro-gun case. But, I come back to the decision today that came down regarding, basic rights here and protections in the workplace. And I remember where Roberts came down on the subject of gay marriage and how he was one of the 6 today on this. At least I, and you're a closer observer than me, Garrett, tend to think you look generationally at the changes, and they're sometimes glacial in the courts. Think how fast gay rights and gay marriage and all the attendant protections that have now come along with it, how fast that's moved in society. You'd argue, I would, it took too long, but still, once we got here, this has moved really fast, hasn't it?
Well, I think on that regard, it would be interesting for those interested to go and read these opinions, because what is striking to me, if you remember the opinions 8 years ago in Obergefell, what is striking to me is that the tone is not entirely, but almost completely respectful toward gays, men, lesbians, and transgender people. So I think that is an important indicium of change when the court that the conservative legal movement has taken such pains to capture, when the court just says, look, what's the fuss? It says because of sex, sexual orientation is part of sex. Can we go home now? That's a really kind of striking setback for the conservative legal agenda.
It is. And as we said right after the beginning of this conversation, don't minimize the importance of today and just the velocity. This class who has never received equal protections are at least slowly but surely getting there too. Garrett, I appreciate the time as always. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And up next, the president got himself another photo op this week, and this time at the West Point graduation. But is his relationship with the military deteriorating? This, as a growing number of people ask, is Trump's health also on the downside? We're going to take a look at both those questions next.